svakako da je Srbija posebna zemlja i drago mi je što sam učio srpski. Ne znam da li ga pričam kako treba, ali pokušavam. Ali dobro, sada ću se prebaciti na engleskom pošto je bolje. I believe that every trip changes a person significantly. When you travel, no matter where you go, every place is a challenge, every place is an adventure, and you have something to learn from every single place as well. When I was younger, I used to travel every year from Greece to England, and to be honest, I think that those are the trips that changed me most, because I was very impressionable, I was very young. And I think when people travel when they are younger, they absorb the environment much faster, and everything they experience there has a much bigger effect on them than what they will see later in life when they are already much more adaptable and nothing is such a surprise anymore. So I would say that in terms of that, travel when you're younger, because that's when you will change most. Well, to be a world citizen means to accept and tolerate everything. That means to accept cultural relativism. So when you go somewhere, you don't have your own point of view in mind or your own culture, and you don't judge another culture based on your own. And that is especially important once you leave your own continent. So in Europe, we all have more or less similar cultural principles, even though countries are very different in certain things. But then when you go to a country like Japan, or say Saudi Arabia, where things are very different, I think being a global citizen means being able to accept that culture for what it is, take it in, enjoy it even if it's very different to where you're coming from. Well, my answer is going to surprise you. So I think when we talk about culture shock, people expect an answer like, oh, Vietnam was really difficult, or oh, when I was in India. But the country where I get the biggest culture shock is the United States. And people always are like, what? And I'll explain why. When you go to India or Africa or Latin America, you know that it's going to be different. And I think as a traveler, I'm always ready for it. I'm ready for the very different weather. I'm ready for a different language, for people who behave in a different way. Now, when you go to the United States, there you expect more or less what you know. You're like, well, the United States is a majority Western country, most people are Caucasian, so you expect it's going to be similar to where you come from if you're European. And then you go to the United States and everything is different. First of all, the way people think is completely different. America is an extremely individualist culture, and I think that in Europe, especially in Southern Europe, you get much more collective cultures where family traditions play a bigger role. Then in the United States, everything is much bigger. Distances are huge, buildings are big, food comes in these enormous portions. So all these things are a big shock, because when you see the people, you expect them to be just like you. But then as you're experiencing it, you realize how incredibly different that is. So for me, and this happens every time I go there, the United States is a huge culture shock. Obviously, that's an excellent question. Well, first of all, I have to say, I think it's very important to know your own country first. Here in Serbia, I get the impression that people don't really travel around the country and they don't even appreciate it much. They like going abroad to the beach, whatever. But I really think wherever you're from, you first should know your own country and your own culture. And then, before you go very far to another continent, you should go around the countries near you. Why? Well, I think first of all, we all have a negative, well, sometimes a negative idea about our neighbors. So we make jokes about them, or in sports matches, we always, fight them more than we do other teams. And I think it's important when you do go to another country near you, you actually meet people, the place gets a face and a personality of its own, and that's where you realize how similar you may be. In fact, if you go to countries near you, you realize that they may be different in some aspects. So language may be different, certain traditions, but in many others, they're very close to you. And that makes sense. You know, countries that are geographically near have to be culturally relatively near. So that's when you probably feel much closer to them, and then you can become better friends in general, and that will also help political relations very often, which I think is one of the biggest benefits you can have. So yes, absolutely, you should travel to countries in the neighborhood before you attempt going very far away. We big travelers always make a difference between the tourist and the traveler. Now, if you go somewhere for a couple of days or a week to the beach, to party, then you're a tourist. I think that way, okay, you get an idea about the country, but you certainly cannot really understand it. And that is why for students it is exceptionally important if they get the opportunity to go to other countries for a longer period of time. And that is how exchange programs can be a great benefit. If you live in a place for 3 months or longer, that is when you really start to understand it. That is when you really meet people, not only for a few drinks or fun, but you really get to know them deeper as individuals. That's when you understand the similarities and the differences you have. And that is when you really start realizing that the world is big and that there's all sorts of different points of view. And that's how you can develop yourself. You become more tolerant, you become more open, you become more accepting. And that is what makes you a traveler and a more developed person rather than a tourist. So absolutely, students need to go abroad for a longer period of time and get any opportunity they have to develop themselves that way. It's quite hard to visit all the countries in the world. So there's 193 countries. When you reach the last one, it's like the end of a very, very long road. Now, I think I felt a bit like Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic, where, you know, he goes like this and says, "I'm the king of the world." I really felt like that. My last country was Equatorial Guinea, which is a very small country in Africa, but very difficult to get to because they don't issue visas. So I had a long wait, and I had to do, I had to really search before I managed to get there. I think I felt a lot of relief. It felt great knowing that I didn't give up, that the goal had been achieved. At the same time though, there was a feeling of fear or even emptiness, like, now what? It's done, and what will I do next? What's the next goal? You know, if you're a person who chases goals and milestones, then when you reach one, you've got to find the next one. Otherwise, you don't feel any personal purpose. So that's when I had new goals. I needed to achieve all the territories in the world, or I needed to go to every country twice. And this is what I'm trying to do now, to visit all the countries a second time, which is also the chance to really understand them better.